One thing I am asked quite a lot in this game is, how do you tune a car? Now, it may seem very obvious, the people that are playing this game on a day-to-day basis will have their own interpretation, as everybody will, as to how to tune a car, what's the best balance, what's the most optimal way of getting the maximum performance out of any vehicle in the game. Now, it's going to create a lot of subjective topics, you know, rear wheel drive over front wheel drive over all wheel drive to start off with. You know, the tunes are always going to be different. Then, you know, you've got the issue of RP, lots of RP. Well, you can be, you know, you can be wide with the parts you've got fitted. You can have that thing fully maxed out, or perhaps a low RP. Well, you can't really do all too much with it, and where do you then start to focus your balance? What I'm going to do for the purpose of today's video, I'm going to use the Mustang, the 2018 Mustang here, that it is still essentially in its stock format with a bit of a livery applied to it. And I'm going to kind of walk through how I would tune this car for some road racing. Now, of course, it's rear wheel drive, and for today's purpose, we're going to stick some parts on it first of all, walk through the different options of how I would personally tune this car, being a rear wheel drive daily driver. So first of all, heading into the workshop, we already know the first thing we want to do here. We want to come in, always want to just slap on every part we can. The performance upgrades, we want to get this thing as fast as we can. Typically, this is what we're going to do in any racing game. We want to get the maximum performance of every single car we have. I'm going to quickly throw on every possible max upgrade here, and I'll come back and talk about why I would choose this upgrade over that upgrade, and then we'll talk about the tune. So with every possible race spec upgrade applied to the car, I'm first of all going to walk through what I would look at depending on the RP. Now of course, if we come into a race with high RP, we're going to slap on every possible highest upgrade we can, the anti-lag turbo, the race specs brakes, the track spec suspension, all of the chassis upgrades, all of the aero upgrades, slick tyres, and of course the race ECU. But first of all, I'm going to talk about what if the restrictions were low. Where would we want to actually upgrade this car? How would I look to upgrade it? Well, let's just say we had a strong limitation for upgrades. Well, first of all, what I'm going to say is come over to suspension. Now, instantly, of course, we want to have the track suspension. We want to get this thing as nimble and as firm as it possibly can be. But one top tip I would have first of all is come on over and throw on the all-road suspension. Now, with the way this car's tuned currently, with all the parts applied, with the stock suspension, we would have an RP of 771. If we went all the way up to track spec, we would jump all the way up to 830, losing 50 RP there. But if we come down to the all-road suspension, we can see we drop all the way down to 752 RP. Now, it is quite a steep jump considering we're looking to save as much RP as possible, where we may want to put that into power upgrades if we are restricted by what kind of RP we had. Then we can maybe talk about the gearbox. Is it really worthwhile in this game changing the gearbox? I would say yes, it is for the most part. However, if you are then again restricted with the RP, I would actually say sticking with the stock gearbox, or maybe in some instances fitting the short gearbox is going to be the way to go, minimizing how much RP you are losing. I personally do like the short gearbox, however on some of the longer races you're going to suffer as the top speed will be limited, and in certain aspects on certain cars the short gearbox simply doesn't work. So always have a look here, come over and look at the 0 to 37s, the 0 to 60s, and of course the top speeds, what you're truly getting out of it. But on limited RP races with cars that you're restricted with how much RP you can use, sometimes wise just to stick with the stock gearbox, maybe focus in on transmission upgrades. Now you're going to lose RP here. We can see in the stock upgrade, or the stock format, 804 RP, moving all the way up to race spec, you're going up to 830, losing out on 26 RP. But the change you're going to have in the gearbox itself, the way it moves through the gears, it is very much noticeable. So there is certain ways you can save on this one. Then I would actually come over here and look at the chassis and aero. If you're limited for RP, it means you're probably going to be limited for what kind of speed you're going to get out of the car. And at that point, are you really saving anything by having aero upgrades fitted to this? We can see at this point, we would have 735 horsepower, 870 Newton meters of torque, a very powerful Mustang. But let's just say you only had 300 horsepower and maybe 400 Newton meters of torque. are you really going to save that much? Are you going to be that much faster with having the RP wasted on an aero kit? My answer to that is it probably wouldn't be, and it would probably go the same here with the chassis. Now yes, you are saving a considerable amount of weight, 1650 kilos all the way down to 1520. You are saving a lot of weight here, but you're also sacrificing a lot of RP points. For me, on lower RP races, I wouldn't be touching this. I would be focusing in on, first of all, that transmission upgrade, and of course on towards performance upgrade parts. Now we come into a big one, and it all surrounds the turbocharger. Now, this is going to split opinions. A lot of people like responsive, a lot of people like powerful. I don't think many people actually use the bi-turbo in game, and I actually find the anti-lag turbo to be a bit OP in certain instances and a bit useless in other. For me, I typically come over here and I always, on lower RP races, look towards responsive and the powerful turbos. You're getting a heavy increase in power. We can see we're at 650 horsepower with no turbo. With the responsive turbo, we jump up to 725, an increase of 75 horsepower, and the powerful turbo rather, an extra 6 horsepower. But what we can see crucially there is you actually save quite a few RP. Where we're going down 5 RP in that instance, it might not sound a lot, but when you're restricted for RP, saving that 5 RP, having the powerful turbo over the responsive turbo, that may just save you and help you tune the car. So we've spoke about their PR limited races. What about opening the box up here? What if you're mid to higher RP? Well, again, I would still probably opt towards the, if we go into the correct one, I would probably still opt towards that powerful turbo. Then I would start to look towards upgrading the gearbox. Then we would obviously look at maybe saving some RP on the suspension, but we can still leave it there on sport. We can tune that out, which we'll get to shortly. Obviously looking to upgrade the brakes, obviously looking to upgrade the tyres, the ECUs. Then I would be considering saving some weight with the chassis, and of course applying some of the aero upgrades, get this thing a bit more aerodynamic and moving a bit freer through the air. Then of course on a unlimited PR race, have fun, pick whatever parts you want, maybe even explore what you could do with that anti-lag turbo. I don't personally love the 2 top turbos here. I do like the powerful turbo personally, but when it's RP free, no RP restrictions, have fun with that anti-lag turbo. So we've now got the parts fitted to the car. We obviously know that this thing is going to be very, very lady. We've got every single top spec part fitted to this. It has slick tyres and it's very rainy, so it's going to be hard to balance the car. But where would I then start to look? How would I look to perhaps tune this? Where would we be looking to save this one? It actually doesn't handle the worst in the world, if I'm going to be perfectly honest. There is no tune built for this one, but I'm going to walk through my thought process. There we can see the brakes were useless. Yeah, we have to maybe consider that it's a wet road surface and it is slick tyres. But where would I maybe look to tune this one? Of course, we can see it's not really accelerating the best that it probably could be, and we can maybe make some more time up there. Brakes are pretty useless. They really are pretty useless there, and we can see instantly it wants to spin all the power towards the back end. It doesn't actually turn all too well. So there's a lot we can actually do and start to consider how we want to tune this car. Let's take a look at that one now. Heading into this menu, of course, you can see I don't have any tunes built for this. We've got these stock options: rain, circuit, sport, or at least stock format that is currently fitted. Then of course our tyres on the right hand side. We'll leave the slick tyres fitted for now. You know, these tunes aren't too bad if you don't want to waste any time coming in to try and tune a car, but however, you will make more time, you will be faster around the tracks by building a tune. First of all, we'll come in here with the stock format, and guys, make sure you come down to these custom tabs and select each one. Otherwise, you'll make the mistake I made a few months ago, not having these selected. Regardless of the work you do tuning any of these sections, they will not apply unless you tick all 4 of these boxes. When we start to look at the tunes themselves, right, what we're going to look at here first of all, well, I would actually head on over to the Ibiza map, up onto the freeway section, or head on over to Aberdeen Tunnel into that one. You've got nice long straights and you can start to play about with this gearbox. Are you looking to be focused more towards, you know, top end speed or acceleration? Simply put, if you click on the acceleration tab here, we can see that final gear ratio is all the way to the right, focusing in on getting this thing up as fast as it can. And of course to top speed, we can see right there that it's actually focused all the way to the left, maximizing how much potential this has. So instantly you're going to think, right, well, maybe we want to be in the middle of the road. I would honestly advise heading over to the Aberdeen Tunnel or onto the freeway section at the top of the Ibiza map, and then playing with your gearbox. Now, maybe you want to focus on getting first gear as long as it can, get rid of any wheel spin, then maybe making a linear gearbox. I do like to build the gearboxes fairly linear, so when you do change the gears in the cars, well, they're already on their power band and you're probably going to get the maximum output here. Something to this effect, I would look at this one first and foremost. Then I would flick it over and look at the 0 to 30, the 0 to 60 and the top speed. Already getting 193 miles per hour, that's not bad. And the 0 to the 0 to 30, 1.75, the 0 to 62, 3.64. And as we move this, we can actually see we're bringing that all the way down here, 3.9, 3.90. I would actually look for where I would get the optimal 0 to 62 miles per hour, and it's all the way to the left there, 3.387 seconds. Take this onto the road, and I actually feel how this gearbox felt first and foremost. We're still getting 192 miles per hour of this one, so heading over to the tunnel, which we may do next. You could even play about with second gear depending on how long these gears are, and play about with all of these. But first of all, set your base map for the gearbox, head on over to the freeway section or the tunnel and play about with it. We'll maybe do that one shortly. Next up, we'll look at downforce. Now again, do you want the car planted into the ground, or do you want this one to have a lot of freedom? We can see the difference. 205 miles an hour with no downforce and 183 with downforce. Having that negative is going to plant it into the ground across the front and the rear, but you're sacrificing top end, vice versa, limiting the downforce. Well, this thing's going to be an absolute monster, all the way up to 220 miles per hour. Personally, I like maximum downforce. Most races are going to have a corner to them, and most of the corners are going to have a fair amount of speed. I want downforce, I want that thing planted into the ground. Moving over to the stability next up. Now this is obviously going to depend on what kind of track you're going on to. Have you got bumps? Have you got curbs? Well, maybe you don't want this thing planted all the way down. If you have some bumps, curbs and jumps on that one, maybe you want to raise it up a little bit, stop the car bottoming out and stopping the front or rear snatching on you. Maybe the base map is one up from the left. Give it a little bit of ground clearance. Then we can come down and talk about the actual suspension itself. Now, a lot of people will just come in here, and I've seen a lot of people do it, talk about it and boast that this is the OP format on any car, that you don't actually have to build a suspension tune. Max these all to 120 and these cars will handle perfectly, and I won't dismiss that. That may work for many people. Personally, I like to come in here and I typically, for most road going cars, have a base setup. Rear spring stiffness at 117%, front spring stiffness at 110%, compression for the front shock absorber around about 110, compression for the rear shock absorber, I believe, no, that's the wrong way around, sorry, I usually have that 115 for the front and 110 for the rear. Then for the rebound, I typically bring these ones down between 100 and 105. We'll leave them at 105 just now. We will see how this thing feels. But that's how I would have the base setup. Once again, once I've finished tuning the gearbox on Hong Kong Island, I would go down to the racetrack because it has the most turns, it has long turns, short turns, hairpins, couple of chicanes. It's good for tuning the build the way you want it to be, but that's essentially where I kind of have my base setup. One up from the left for suspension size, 117, 110 rear front stiffness, 115, 110 front to rear compression, 105 across the front and rear rebound, then go away and tune it and see where we land. Heading over to handling next up, and again I have a base setup. What I like with this one: rear acceleration up at 90%, deceleration I typically have between 0 and 20 depending on what the car feels like. If it's the older Porsche 911, I like it at 20. I want the car to pull back a little bit when we come off of the throttle, whereas other cars I don't want them pulling back. The brakes are quite predictable. I would take that deceleration off, and the rear brake all the way up to 100. It's the best balance for the cars. When you have four-wheel drive, it's probably the same kind of setup there, 90, 100 on the rear and the front differentials as well, turning off deceleration, or if you feel like the brakes aren't that great, moving up the rear, central and front deceleration to 10 or 20%, but that's a different variable for an all-wheel drive. Next up to anti-roll bars. Again, kind of got a base setup for this. I like to split these between 40% at the front, 20% at the rear, head on down to the Hong Kong racetrack, throw it about there, do a few laps and see how that feels. The body roll, switching between corner to corner over some bumps, see what that usually feels like, but typically 40 to 20 front to rear is how I would typically set those ones up. And the rear camber, no surprise, I've got a base setup for those ones as well, depending on the race we're going into. If you've got lots of turns, tipping the wheels in at the top, negative camber, you're going to turn the car a lot better. If it's typically a straight track, you don't want any rolling resistance. You want to keep that camber angle at a neutral level. When the wheels are towed in, guys, when the wheels have negative camber, you're going to want less rolling resistance. But if you've got a lot of, turns and tricky corners on a track, I like to knock these ones in negative 2 degrees on the rear, negative 1.5 degree on the front. Again, head down to the racetrack, see how that one feels out. Then we can talk about tire pressures. Now, again, this is open to interpretation. A lot of people will just come in on any road race, knock these up to 6%. Now, having that is fine, but you are also sacrificing traction. If these ones are stiff, you're going to have traction. However, if you have very hard tires and you hit a bump, you've got nothing to absorb that bump apart from the suspension. If you've got a very stiff car, you're going to sacrifice. So typically, I tend to set these between 5 and 5.5. Once again, head them down to the racetrack, see how those ones feel out. However, if you're on a street circuit and there's lots of bumps and curbs to go over, you may want to be more conservative and knock these down towards the 4 bar. If you've got lots of bumps, lots of jumps, you may want to be very cautious down at that 2.6. But typically for me, I would have these set in and around about that 5.5 bar level and then go from there. And lastly, braking. Now, for the longest time, I would always set brakes around about 75% front to rear split, and I would typically go quite aggressive with the brake pressure. However, recently, ABL Vince, setting some good times on leaderboards on the weekly live events, shared a couple of his tunes on a couple of his races, and actually opened my eyes up to something different here. Having negative 1000 brake pressure, your brakes don't lock up. Now, for me, it's too aggressive because it feels like the car completely dies down. So what I've actually started doing here is knocking this down between negative 350 and around about negative 500. Again, taking it down to the racetrack, seeing how the brakes feel and adjusting that brake pressure, but equally adjusting the bias front to rear. If the brakes feel really weak, then I would probably put that brake pressure higher towards the front. Obviously, the front brakes of the vehicles are bigger, they're going to have better braking with the bias more towards the front. Obviously, you're going to be more to the front. 60-40 split would be ideal, but play about with the front to rear bias, play about with the brake pressure down on the racetrack and see how this feels. I'll save this tune for now. We'll head down to Aberdeen Tunnel first of all. We'll feel what that gearbox is like. Then we'll head down to the racetrack and see how the car handles. So for reference, anybody that doesn't know what tunnel I mean specifically here, right in the centre of the map, we can see the gas station, Aberdeen East Gas Station. Hit a fast travel down to here, guys, and you do have these big tunnel runs. Of course, this is where we come in and abuse Frim, but also is the straightest part on the Hong Kong Island map, where you can come up and down here, go back and forward, and balance the tune that you've kind of done with the car. These are one of my two favourite spots. Again, the top freeway section on the Ibiza map is the other one, but head on over to there, where you can then run up and down here and feel what these cars truly feel like. So what we're going to do here with the tune that we just kind of threw together down in the workshop on the Mustang, we're going to see how this one feels off. So launching off the line, obviously max revs, we can see we do get through the gearbox in first gear fairly well, up into second, again, actually feels very good, all the way up to 101 miles an hour. Third gear, right into its power band, again, do you know what, feels good. Fourth gear, again into its power band. I think that's actually quite a well balanced tune there overall. Yes, you can start to play about with those, maybe moving them 0.1, 0.2 left and right. You might make up a bit more time, but for the purpose of today's video, it kind of highlighting where I would have a bass tune set up, come down to here and see how that one feels. We can see we're not actually using all of the gearbox there, barely even getting into fifth gear, and we start to limit towards the top of the gearbox itself. As a bass tune, it's pretty much how I do set up most vehicles. Then come down here, run up and down the freeway section a few times, see how that gearbox feels out, then start to move the sliders across every gear, trying to get the perfect power points for each part of the gearbox. I've genuinely spent hours trying to tune some of these cars. So I would come up here, move those sliders about, get the perfect balance for the gearbox. As we can see here, fourth gear, it's kind of dying out around about 160 miles per hour. So I know I would want to move that final drive maybe to the right a little bit there. It's probably too aggressive towards top speed, so move it more towards acceleration, then start to play with the gears and try to get a better balance. But I'm not going to waste too much time, guys. We're already 20 minutes deep into today's video. I don't want to bore you with that one. If it is something you want to see, let me know and I'll make more videos. But first of all, that is how I would tune the gearbox on most cars on Hong Kong Island. So next up we will of course move over to the racetrack on Hong Kong Island. Again, if you're not familiar with the map, just above where we were for Aberdeen East gas station, at the end of this one, if you zoom into the map just here, we will see the racetrack on Hong Kong Island. Come on over here. For me, it is the OP, the go-to on Hong Kong Island for starting to test the balance of the car. So let's just say we've got that gearbox exactly where we want it to be. We then want to start to balance how this car is. Now, right now, it's not the ideal scenario. We've got slick tyres and the racetrack itself is wet. But with the base tune I do tend to put together on most cars, I would come over here and see how they feel like. We can see obviously it is very leery on the rear end. For me, that's the slick tyres on a wet road. Yes, it is going to still be leery. It is a 700 horsepower rear wheel drive muscle car with, you know, more torque than probably what it needs. So we're going to have a lot of spin up with the rear end, but to balance that one out, well, I would maybe jump into the tune and lower the rear differential. We obviously set it at 90% earlier. If we're experiencing a lot of issues coming out of these corners with the wheels spinning up, well, we've got too much power and the differential essentially is too open. Drop that one down. I would probably drop it down to about 50%. See how that one feels. If we feel it's still too much, drop it to 40, or if we feel it's been too severe and the car's a bit tame coming out of corners, up it maybe to 70. Play about with the slider for the rear differential in the rear wheel drive car. Of course, on a four wheel drive, you're not going to experience it that much. I don't tend to have to move the sliders on four wheel drives all too much. They do tend to be very well balanced. So that's how I would look at balancing the power delivery of a vehicle. Come over to here, we can see we would get a good setup. As it actually sits, the Mustang's not too bad. It's actually quite a lot of fun here with slick tyres in the rain. Then we can move over and talk about how does it handle, how does it transition from corner to corner, how does it handle some of the apexes here, hitting some of those bumps. Well, again, the way I've kind of got that set up in its base tune, it handles the rolling curves here very well, and the transition from one corner to another like so, again, it doesn't actually feel all too bad. So the base tune setup on this car does feel quite good. Yes, we still have that issue, we're in the rain and we've got slick tyres. But having a base setup, something in mind that you are familiar with, guaranteed guys, this will not be the best setup for you as an individual. This is purely my setup, how I balance a car. But I do that across every vehicle, see how it feels, and then come in and try to adjust a few things. Like we can see, yeah, it does actually move pretty well here. It does feel like the base setup worked quite well. But let's just say it was very aggressive on the rumble strips, the red and white stripes on the right hand side of the track, and it really didn't handle all too well. Well, maybe we want to soften up the rebound, or the stiffness of the springs. Let this thing be a little bit more gentle over some of these curbs. The Mustang is actually handling very well. Then we could actually say, okay, well, we hit this bounce, but we come back off too aggressive, and the back end would snap around like so. Well, maybe look at your rebound and your compression. Play about with those, maybe make one softer, the other lighter, vice versa. Play about with those sliders. Get these things balanced to how you would race. Yes, there's some certain people out there will just go 120% for everything and say it's the best way to tune a car. For me, it's simply not the case. Tuning a car is simply tuning a car to how you would drive. Take it to Formula 1 and just look at Red Bull Racing. They are the prime candidates for that one. They've got a car that's perfectly suited for Max Verstappen, but you've had Checo Perez, you've had Liam Lawson, and most recently Yuki Tsunoda jump into that car, and not a single one of them can drive it because that car itself is built to Max Verstappen. Now, yes, I know that is the extreme scenario. We're at the other end of the spectrum playing a computer game, but it's the best case scenario to demonstrate that balancing and tuning the car is simply done to each individual's taste. what I would have built in a car, simply put, wouldn't suit 90% of people, and vice versa. The way some people would tune a car isn't to my liking. I actually had that discussion with Vince in one of the comment section of the video, where I tried out Vince's tune on this very racetrack. And for me, the way Vince got the fastest time on that track, I personally didn't like the tune. It didn't suit me, as it was very leery, the back end was very tail happy, and the front end of the vehicle was very high and very soft, making the car an absolute drift monster. But it obviously works for Vince because he set the fastest time on the leaderboard, and it just wasn't how I personally liked the car. So tuning a car is 100% down to the personal experience of the person driving the car. Not every tune is going to fit everyone. It's like a shoe, guys. Not one shoe will fit every single person. But for me, that's how I would tune a car. First of all, depending on the parts, depending on the RP, then I would come over into the tunnel, tune the gearbox, then I would head down here into the racetrack and balance the car to how I would like the car to be. If you've enjoyed today's video, guys, if you found it useful and informative, additionally, please let me know in the comments section. And again, if you've got any additional tips or tricks on how to tune a vehicle, let me and everybody else know in the comment section of today's video, guys. I do hope you have enjoyed yourselves. Stay tuned for more updates on Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown.